Jill and Anna, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for coming. I really feel grateful to be here. Combining my passion for photography and, more importantly, photojournalism and storytelling, and being able to teach you guys is an incredible opportunity for me. And we're going to share some tips and tricks here that you can use on any camera, even the still phone today. And Anna and I work together at the Collegian, and she's been awarded the big position of photo editor, and she's been absolutely amazing. So we are working together to put this together for you, and I'll just give it to Anna for a second to tell you what she's going to be doing with us today.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'll be assisting Jill today, and for the following meetings. I'll be checking the chat, so any questions that you have as we're going through the presentation, I'll be answering in there. Any Canon questions, I'm here for you, so.
Great, thank you. And as it's slipped out, I am a Nikon user, but I do know the Canons. They work a little differently, but the ideas that we're going to be teaching you and telling you about will all be transformable to the Canon. So this workshop is about you guys, and we are here to teach you, mentor you, develop your skills. So please, this is about us and learning, and I'm sure if you have a question, someone else does too. So please ask us anything, feel free to jump in. Anna, as she said, will be monitoring the chat, and we will learn lots of things that you can apply to enhance your storytelling. As a photojournalist working in newspapers, I always had that kind of a little bit of an animosity with reporters when their stories got bigger and my images got smaller, but you all are going to be enhancing with your photography and really using those images to make great stories. I know that it can be a challenge. I'm not sure when you received your cameras, but I know that being asked to do another thing as a reporter can be really challenging. And when I was at the Times Call, we started to get into the multimedia and do recording and putting together pieces and juggling everything. And when do you take that picture? When do you report? When do you write? And so what I would like you guys to be thinking about is how you can use your cameras as your notebooks. So for example, if you are writing down your details about the lady with the red shoes, the size of the crowd, take pictures of that rather than writing it down, and use that as a time saver for you. Think about how you can use the camera as your notebook. And some of you, I think, you're able to record on your cameras, and we'll get into that in the later sessions. But here on the left, you can see I was flummoxed, right? That I've got this huge Viking standing over me. I don't know, I got gloves on. This is at the polar bear plunge, trying to figure out my audio, taking pictures. He's laughing at me. I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I doing, right? And it is something that you will become more confident with just a few tools that we're going to teach you here today. So the way that we've set up the workshop is that I'm going to discuss, lecture, jump in anytime. This is for you guys. So if I come across something that doesn't make sense at all, either type it in the chat and we'll get back to it, or open up your mic and talk to us. And then the last part of the workshop, we're going to talk about some of the images that I've been looking at of yours, and take any questions that you have, anything, please ask. The way that over the next 4 weeks, this week, we're just gonna learn to see differently. Think about your images in a different way, more like a photographer. And I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed by the technical aspects and the numbers and all of that. That's gonna come in week 2 when we're gonna break it down a little bit more. There's no harm in shooting auto. Right off the bat, I want everyone to feel like that is okay, because it's worse if you miss the picture, right? So in week 3, we're gonna combine the technical side, the composition, and talk about how we can make more impactful images. And depending on what you guys want out of the workshop, in week 4, we'll talk a little bit more about post-production and start talking about video. This is for you, this is your journey, and over those 4 weeks, you're gonna see an incredible difference. And I know when contest season rolls around in February, I'm gonna be getting lots of emails with all your winning award pictures. So I'm looking forward to that. To be honest, I really don't feel like I became a great photographer until a few years ago, when I was able to slow down and actually listen to my subjects and to hear what they were saying and to capture their feelings, their emotions. And prior to that, I was running around like you guys do, right? You're at an event, you're over here, oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. Oh, now I have to change my aperture, my this, what am I doing? I have to capture everything. And what I want you guys to be thinking about is, how can you slow down? How can you take great pictures? How can you listen to your subjects and see what's important? In this workshop, we're going to talk about the different auto modes that you have. The Canon is a great camera, and the different modes are fantastic. We're going to talk about some of those situations that you are always going to, the ribbon cuttings, the press conferences at noon in a hot sun, going to the gyms to photograph, you know, the high school basketball player with no light. How do you make those portraits that you're going to and everyone's in their office sitting at their computer? How can we make those more interesting? And I will give you a few secrets about grumpy editors. Bottle of whiskey always works. I want to say that I've been watching your work for the last couple of weeks since I came on board with this project, and I am so impressed. And as a former photojournalist and seeing what's happening to the media out there, we need you guys more than ever. Small local newspapers are where it's at. If we're not getting that information about what's in our community and we're only hearing those big news organizations, we're missing so much. And it's so important. And I know you guys are risking a lot. I know that you're in a really difficult situation, not only with the health, but the financial. And I just want you guys to recognize that you are so needed. And in my opinion, sounds a little corny, but you guys are the heroes too. So thank you for what you're doing. And I'm hoping that I can help you to make better stories. So I have, as I said, been stalking you guys a little bit, and I'm sorry if I missed anyone's work here, but I wanted to pull out some of the amazing images that I've seen. And I see, David, you're in my top screen here. That top one of the business going out of closing down is absolutely one of my favorites that I've seen. It's just has every encompassing element, the flag, the mask, the boutique, really excellent work. The personality is coming through with the principal, great perspectives here. That really are telling the stories of what's going on around us, and amazing ability to capture emotion from all the people that you guys are covering. And I think it's super impressive. What I'm hoping again is just to make those images really, really powerful and stand out, so that your articles get read more, right? I have to put in the one on the bottom left. That's one of my former students that I taught at the Art Institute of Colorado. When I was looking through these, that came up, and I was like, is that what? And it is. So I love this picture on the bottom of the two people meditating, the perspective of everybody lying down on the ground, showing that overall impact of what's happening in your community. You guys are right on target with everything that you're doing, and it's really, really impressive. Jessica, I've been seeing a lot of your work, and I know you've got a lot of praise for this story, which is really pretty powerful. I know that that was not an easy situation to photograph. And we're gonna talk about ways to communicate with your subjects. I know that you already have a sensitivity as reporters to be able to do that, but when you pick up the camera, I'm sure you have all seen that things change a little bit. Great stuff. So today we're going to talk about 3 ways that you can improve your photography, and even you, Mark, with your cell phone can do this, and the Nikon will do it for you. 1, have a strong subject. Control your background and fill the frame. So we as community newspapers, it's really about those small moments that are happening that have the impact. We don't have to be at National Geographic, we don't have to be at Africa or Asia to make amazing pictures. And I think that's one thing that we always have to stop and see, how amazing our images are in our own backyard. So a strong subject, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something that is very colorful or, again, super exotic. We have that happening in our own backyard. And right now, with all the protests and the masks and everything, there's a ton going on. But what you need to be thinking about is, where is that really strong subject within those situations? And slowing down and observing, who is the one that I need to pay attention to? Which is the sign that I need to be looking at? What really is going on here beyond just people gathering and observing? So a lot of times what I will do is I'll go to a situation, I'll be in the back of the room or protest, and I will just kind of observe and see who's interesting, who's colorful, who's engaging, right? And start to focus on that one person. We have an amazing opportunity with everything that we're covering, especially these county fairs, right? Cute little kid, love the kids, and it's very simple. All I needed to do was find a good background, and then I could make an image that stands out, right? It's very simple. A kid with a trophy. Looking around, finding where is the action, who is engaged with what's happening is what you need to be thinking about. Who's interacting? That's the part where your audience is going to start connecting with your image, because they are connecting with the audience. Now, things that we cover aren't necessarily very interesting. Cheerleading camp with a bunch of kids. But it's how we organize those images with our composition that can make them really, really dynamic, right? We cover county fairs all the time. We cover, I think you have plenty of rural coverage where you guys are at. And I just wanted to break here that obviously not all of these images are mine. These are a mix of different photographers who have won awards over the last decades. Humor is something that's very, very difficult to do in photography, in my opinion, but it is doable. And what we want to think about is, how can we kind of juxtaposition what's around us to bring out that humor? And I would encourage you to be thinking about that when you're out and looking at what's around you, because life is pretty funny. Now, controlling your background, this is one of the biggest things that I would like you guys to be focusing on. A good background is going to make or break you. If you have a lot of distractions, it can totally ruin your picture. And I've noticed that in some of your work, and I'm going to pick on you a little bit in the newsroom there. I think, Nick, if you're in there, hold on. You got a lot of good pictures, but you have so many. I have ones to pick on. How many times have you been sent out to go photograph the construction, right? 1,000,000 times. How can I make that interesting? How can I avoid all the distractions, the backgrounds? So there's a couple different ways that you can control your background. One, very clear, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, is perspective. Getting out that noise, getting out what's around you, right? Shooting down low. one of the banes of our existence is all the sponsorship signs and all the houses that are in the background and the cars. So if we're getting down lower and thinking about how can we get rid of this noise, that is one thing that's going to make our images stand out. Now, the other bane of my personal existence is white trucks, white vans, and anything white, actually. So what I want you guys to do is squint at this image and see what comes up, right? Probably the white truck. Sorry, back there, Nick. Our eye always goes to the highest point of contrast. Our eye always goes to the highest point of contrast. So we need to be looking for those types of distractions that really blow us out of the water, which the white truck does. Now, there's a lot of solutions here. We could have shot lower, we could have moved, and we could have cropped editors out there, right? So one thing that we want to get from you guys in the last half of the workshop is how are you processing your images, and can you have the ability to crop these images so we can crop out some of the distractions. Now, we don't want you to spend a lot of time on the computers doing all this stuff because the fun is being on location. So it's about trying to do your best to get it right first in the camera. So be thinking about that. Oh, the farmer's market's one of the worst, right? Because it always has those big white tents and people are wearing white shirts because it's hot. So how can we avoid those kinds of things? Here's a great example where in the background you can see there's buildings, there's people in the background in the lower right-hand corner. And what this photographer did was to mimic or repeat or mirror what's going on to get rid of all those other distractions. This is a great shot. I know that we also shoot a lot of high school activities, and there's always stuff going on in the background that is super distracting. So perspective and viewpoint. This is one of the biggest ways that we can control our images and control our background. And I've seen a lot of images that you guys have shot with you getting down low and trying different things. And remember, you guys are walking people. So get up high, get down low. Avoid this habit of shooting right what's in front of you from eye level. Think about how you can make your images have more impact with the way that you're positioning yourself. Getting down to that eye level, bringing that closer, because your audience is going to connect more and they're going to feel like they're relating to what's happening. A classic example of tons of houses and all kinds of stuff in the background, just getting down low, trying to get that perspective, right? So one thing you can do to control perspective. Another thing that we'll be talking about later is aperture. Now, one of the things that I see happening in your work, and I want you guys to be thinking as reporters about your pyramid, right? I don't know if everyone's still using the pyramid with the most important information at the top. Think about all that fringe that your rough editors cuts out and says, this, we don't need this, right? I want you guys to be thinking about that with your images and fill the frame with all important information. And that's where one, cropping can come into play, because you can crop that out if you can't get closer or you can't get some of those things. But really think, everything in this frame needs to have a value. You're responsible as a photographer for everything in the frame, right? So here we have, we can see in the background the faces, that adds more perspective. The butterflies are in the corner of the frame. Our eye is moving all over the frame to be thinking about that. And one of the things we want to talk about is how our eye moves in the frame. Getting rid of the clutter, filling the frame with important information. Again, be thinking about what you do as a reporter to get rid of that information in a story, or how you use that information to highlight. So this was a a shoot at a mall in Longmont, actually, and they wanted their logo and that information in the image. This was not a journalism assignment. But there's also a ton of other distractions here. You can see the sign in the background, the tent in the background, the woman on the side. So my thought is, what can I do to hide that? And I just stood there waiting for these beautiful butterflies, I have a thing for butterflies, to fill and cover those distractions so that everything is uniform or fluid in terms of that kind of composition. And one of the things that I would like to see you guys do is, again, slow down and take more pictures. Don't be satisfied with just the one shot, right? I know you're rushed. I know you have a lot of assignments in a day, but if you slow down, you won't need to be so distracted that you're jumping around from subject to subject, because you're focusing on making a really strong image that's going to go on the cover of the newspaper, right? And then you don't have to stress. If you can slow down, think about creating an image that's really, really strong, then you don't have to be getting home and going, what am I going to be putting on the cover, right? I really don't know. Another image where you can see all the information is useful in the frame, and that the hands helped for us to see and lead us in as a viewer, right? And it's right down there where the audience is so they can relate. I don't know if anyone remembers these two old ladies. I don't know if they're still alive, but you know, I could have shot this to show the stands were empty or shown that they were at a basketball game, but that is not important. What's important are these people. So, you know, focusing right in on them. And what's great is I believe you guys have two lenses, a 50, I think, and go ahead and confirm with me in the chat with Anna. I think you have a 50 and some kind of 70 to 180. And that is a great lens. The longer lens is fantastic, in particular because of our current situation with the mask, right? We can't necessarily get as close as we would like to. And using those long lenses are going to provide us with a lot more opportunity. What also the long lens does is it compresses the background, right? So it really makes the background get more blurry, more compressed. And we'll show you some more examples of that. So zooming in tight. A lot of what I've seen, some graduation shots and some speaker shots, you're including a lot of information that really doesn't add any value to the image. And all you really need to do is get in tight. Now, it's not usually very interesting to see the bottom of someone's shoe, but the perspective, again, and the way that they filled the frame adds to that value, right? And it also, if you can see, you know, you feel like you're right there underneath the shoe, right? So how can we make these mundane, boring situations more interesting and show that character come through with our subjects? Filling the frame, having something in the frame that is useful. Many of you probably know Aaron from the Denver Post. This was in a long time ago when he was at the Wyoming Tribune, but great shot. Something that you guys are told to go out. We need wild art. I'm not sure what you call it. Wild art, feature, day in the life of, and you're like, oh, I don't want to drive around and look for this picture, but you can find these amazing shots in everyday moments and make them spectacular. They may not be interesting. You may have seen someone sledding a gazillion times before, but it's the way that you shoot it that makes it more relatable to your subject. Now, I'm afraid, I'm sorry, I forgot who I'm picking on here, so forgive me. But here's an example of where we would want to try to get in tighter, right? We have a lot of wasted space at the top, and because it's white, our eye is going right there. So our eye has a natural movement of how we go through the frame, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But as Westerners, we read left to right. So our eye reads the images left to right. And we also read our images in what's a Z pattern, right? So usually our most important quadrants are the top left, middle, and top right. Now, I see so many great faces in this image and a lot going on. The banner's great. And I know that the ribbon cutting's probably a monthly, if not weekly, assignment that you have to go to. And what I want you guys to be thinking about is, how can I make this different this time? What can I do that's different from the last time I shot it or someone else in the paper shot it, right? So things we could have done here is reframe, get those feet. One of the things that you want to try to avoid is cropping on arms and legs and joints. That's kind of a general rule. Obviously, all these rules can be broken in different circumstances, but try to be thinking about not cropping on those joints. So feet, we could have the feet in a little bit more. Focus on one of the key players and shoot like crazy, right? Set your camera, it's okay. Set your camera on motor drive and fire it off, because the difference between a great shot and an okay shot is a fraction of a second. Now, if we would have just laid on that motor drive and waited till she brought down those scissors a little bit, we would have had her face a little bit more. Or we could have zoomed in tight with these giant scissors, which those are pretty spectacular. You know, the banner, they put a lot of effort into this ribbon cutting. So how can we represent that? How can we highlight, lift that? I know they're not the most exciting assignments to shoot, but you can make it much more interesting, and the chamber will love you for it. So 3 easy things that you guys can do. Control the background. Our backgrounds make or break us, right? Let's always think about those horrendous white bands in the back of our images. Have a strong subject. Really take the time to be thinking, I'm at this protest, there's a gazillion people, who's the most interesting person? And fill the frame with the most important information. Again, thinking like you would as a reporter, I'm not gonna have this isn't important. The same thing with your images. A little bit on composition. How are we doing on time, Anna?
30 minutes. So.
Okay. So we're gonna do just a brief bit on the idea of rule of thirds, and I really would like you guys to be trying to implement this, this week, right? So the rule of thirds, and I know that you guys are probably already aware of this, but if you look at this particular grid and you see where the mouse is, that's one of our most important quadrants, because that's where our eye starts to look as Westerners. So what we want to try to do is hit those quadrants with our most important information. Here's another great one, right? So that lower right quadrant, and there's a lot of ways people talk about this. They say the golden triangle or the spiral, and we can talk more about that. But if you are thinking, about that, where are my important quadrants and where can I put that important information, is going to make a huge difference in your images, right? We have a lot of things that we can make much more dynamic by using those rule of thirds, especially when it's an overall. Thinking about where is our horizon line, how much sky do we have? And one of the things that happens in Colorado is that we have these bright, bright skies that actually, when we photograph, they turn white, right? So then the images are blown out because we've been shooting on auto, and we'll talk about that. But we want to be careful that we don't have those white skies, because our eye always goes to the highest point of contrast. So thinking about, can I divide my image, my frame, which I'm responsible for, everything that's in the frame, into thirds, right? When you can do it from horizontal, that was horizontal to vertical. And again, thinking about where can I put these important information, excuse me, into the frame. So if you have your camera, what we want to do with you now is to set up the grid view. I don't know if anyone's already using the grid view in the newsroom, but we want you guys to try to set it up and try it for a couple days, just to get you familiar with that. So Anna, I am going to see if I can put you in the spotlight video. And hopefully everyone, she's become big for you. Is that correct? Can anybody give me some feedback? No, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen a second. Bear with me, guys. Thank you. And hopefully you can see Anna now. If you can't see her big, go ahead and change her over to speaker view. But she's gonna show you how to turn on your grid. So take it away, Anna.
Sure. So everyone has the Canon 77D, correct? Okay. So I have the 80D, but it's pretty similar. So I'm just going to show you on my screen and kind of describe as I go. So if you turn on your camera and click on menu, it should take you to this kind of screen. It might be on the camera. Does everyone see that?
Just nod if you do. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up.
And so basically you're going to want to get to the wrench icon at the top and get to number 2. Is everyone good with that?
You got it. Just give us a nod or a thumbs up in the newsroom.
Okay. So then you're going to want to go down to viewfinder display. And it should give you 3 options. So it should say electronic level, grid display, and flicker detection. Does everyone see that? Okay.
Yes.
So you're gonna go to grid display and you're gonna hit show. And so basically what that's gonna do is when you look through your viewfinder, it'll give you the grid. So as you're shooting, you can tell if you're following the rule of thirds.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Anna. So just give it a try and shoot with that for a couple days. If it becomes really annoying to you, go ahead and turn it off. But try it just to see. And what I hope you guys are doing is playing too. And I know that you're busy and you have a lot of things going on in your lives, but take your camera out, you know, when you're not on duty and try some of these things. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen real quick with y'all. So we wanna also talk to you a little bit about the different auto modes, but as I promised, I wanted to see if anyone has any questions at the moment. Burning ones. Okay, I see a hand. Is that Nick? Who's that? Mute.
Hi. I guess
Hi.
this will probably be, you'll probably go over this right now actually, but I had a question about shooting motion. I feel like sport doesn't really work that well. Shutter speed is also kind of hit and miss for me. So, but you probably are going to go over that. So.
Are you, is that Nick?
Yeah, I'm Nick. Hi.
Nick, you're doing a great job. You notice you have a lot of photos and all your images that run digitally have slideshows, which are lovely. And I want to encourage everyone to think about shooting that, and we'll get to that as well. So am I still sharing my screen, Anna?
No.
Okay, stand by with me, y'all. Right. So great question, and we will discuss that. So we've got a couple different modes: auto, program, speed, aperture. I don't want to get too technical, but I think you have a great point. I'm going to first talk about aperture priority, which is actually my favorite way to shoot. And the reason why is because I like the ability to blur out the background so my subject pops. Now, all of these aspects of exposure, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO all interplay, and we'll get into that more in the following week, but I don't want anyone to get too overwhelmed with that. And the reason and the instances that you would use this mode, aperture mode, is for portraits, busy events, hectic backgrounds. So this is just a quick example of a shoot that I did in a parking lot at a grocery store. And you maybe have had those for opening events or something, and there's all kinds of crazy signs. These aren't the greatest pictures in the world, but I just want to be able to show you what you can do with aperture. So the top portraits, that's a really shallow depth of field, 2.8 for f4, right? So the smaller the number, the more blurred you get. And we'll go into that, what that means with light as well. But when you're in one of those hectic situations, you know, I've got a car, I've got a liquor store, I got a Safeway in the background, all I'm trying to do is reduce that distraction as much as possible. We really don't want everything in focus. We only want that subject in focus. So you would, if you were in one of these situations, you would shoot on aperture priority, and you would make sure in your camera you're seeing numbers like f4 or f5.6, okay? Everybody with me? Little nods there, yeah, cool, right? So that's gonna help you, especially in these protests, right? And anything where there's a ton of people and lots of signs, lots of white signs. Think about using aperture priority to make that person that you're focusing on sharp, right? And pop. And we're going to go into more of these in detail in next week. I just want you guys to be excited about photography and start to think differently. Now, your question, Nick, is a great one. And there's obviously a bunch of different, sorry guys. You with me still? Is everybody here, Anna? Yeah, okay. So this is a cheat sheet, and I'm gonna pass these to we're gonna show you the recording, and I'm gonna give you some cheat sheets. And you said that the sports mode doesn't, or shutter speed mode doesn't always work, which is TV in Canon language. Part of what's happening with that is, my guess is, your ISO is not necessarily fast enough. So especially if you're in a dark situation like a gym, you have to raise your ISO higher to give your exposure more benefit of light, right? So one of the things that we're going to work on are these formulas. So for example, I know that if I'm going to go photograph somebody, I'm going to go photograph David. I'm going to make an awesome portrait in his office there, but I know that it's probably pretty dark. So I know in terms of ISO, right? This is the film speed. I need to start my ISO at least 400. Now, if I'm going into a gym, I know that I probably need to be at 800 to be able to get that benefit of these fast shutter speeds. Now, one of the things that also comes into play is if you're using those longer lenses. So what's happening is that you're having motion shake from yourself, you're breathing, right? And this is especially important when you're running around shooting protests, right? Because you're running, you're trying to keep up with everybody, you're stopping, you're photographing something, you're moving, right? And they're moving. And I have an example of this in here in a second. So you need to make sure that the shutter speed is fast enough. So a couple, sorry, wrong way. Sports, protests, kids, hectic situations when you're running, wanting to stop that action. Cloudy days, 400 ISO, faster shutter speed. My rule of thumb for even photographing still portraits is around 250, right? The shutter speed of 250. The reason why I've thrown this is because we can use that shutter speed intentionally to make more creative, interesting pictures. This is another example of you would think to yourself, I'm not gonna need to be fast here, right? But you also want to be fast because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Most of this is static, but you don't want to miss anything. So the rule of thumb for me personally is that I'm making sure that I'm at a shutter speed of 250. Now, all of this depends on what your ISO is and your aperture, but the auto mode on your Canons should decide all of that information. Now, program, right, is where you all are deciding the ISO, right? So when I'm going to an assignment and I know that I'm going to be outside, I know I'm already going to be at 100 or something, a low ISO, okay? And I know that if I'm going to be in an office, a gym, I know that I'm going to be at a higher ISO, around 400, 800. And we're going to get into that more next week, but I just don't want to overwhelm you guys. And I'm sorry if I'm picking on you again. Is this you, Nick? I'm sorry, whoever I'm picking on again. I love this shot, love the sign, love what's happening here. It is a little bit out of focus. And the reason why is because of exactly what I was talking about. Your shutter speed is probably not fast enough. So you're moving, you're gotten down low, reduce the distractions, which is awesome. Love that. But there's, the shutter speed is too low. And if you send me the image, I can tell you exactly what happened. But my guess is it was probably around a 60th of a second, maybe a 30th of a second. And that's why it's a little bit out of focus. So shutter speed is really important for getting your images in focus and having more opportunity to do things that are faster. Does that help at all, Nick? Is that okay? So I promised that I was going to give you guys time to ask more questions. So bring it. Tell us what we can do to help you understand your cameras more and situations that you're constantly faced with. And you can go ahead and okay, got somebody.
Hello, am I the somebody?
Hi. Hi, somebody.
Hey, this is Elliot.
Hi, Elliot.
Thank you guys for doing this. My question is about ISO. I'm not sure where I heard this, but I once heard that it is best to shoot on the lowest ISO possible while still getting the most light. So I find when like shooting in manual and you're messing with everything and you're trying to figure out what the right combination of shutter speed is, I don't know, sometimes you end up pumping the ISO all the way up and then it's doesn't look as great. So I've been trying to keep it lower, but I don't actually know if that's true. I don't even know where I heard that information.
No, that is one of the common things that's a great question. Thank you. That is one of the common things that people say to people starting off with photography. And one of the things, it is a good general rule. Your guys' cameras are pretty strong. The reason why they say it, number one, is because when you go into the higher ISOs of 1600, 2000, 3200, 6400, please don't, right? It starts to get what is called noisy, grainy. So if you guys, and this where you may have seen it, Nick, is when you're going to shoot and it's just like dark and big giant grain and all of that. That's why people are saying don't shoot on those high ISOs. Now your cameras are pretty much prosumer cameras, so they can handle the high ISOs. So don't worry too much about that. But the idea, again, is, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I've been there. It's like, oh, it's too bright. Let me turn the shutter speed down. Let me turn the aperture down. Oh, I need to turn the ISO. Oh, you know, so all of these things are going through and you're not making any progress because you're turning everything. So the idea with ISO is get these formulas, right? So you know if you're right now, 11 o'clock, noon, you need to be at 100, right? Or 50 if your cameras go to 50. But coming inside, you need to make sure that you're changing that to a 400, or if you're going to be in shadow, or if it's going to be dark of any nature, you have to bump that up. You have to do that, right? Because to get everything to work, the aperture and the shutter speed, that has to be set first. And that's what I personally do, how I shoot personally. I always set the ISO first thing. And then, because I know that I want a shallow depth of field, that's my priority, aperture priority, then the camera makes those other decisions. So choose, what I would say to you is, and we'll talk more about ISO, and I'll give you guys some cheat sheets, but choose that ISO first, knowing what your situation is, right? Read your situation, prepare for your situation. You're going into someone's home, right? And it's gonna be dark and they're gonna be sitting in their living room. You know that you're gonna be in 400 or 800, and that's okay, okay? Now, aperture priority, what that also allows you is not only the shallow depth of field, but it also allows you to have more light come in. And so if you set those two things, either the ISO or the shutter speed, or the ISO and aperture, the rest you don't want to mess with, right? Because we'll get to that point. But if you can control those two things, the camera will make those other decisions. Does that help? Did I lose you? I lost them. They're gone. I think they're frozen. And I think Nick had a question. All right. David, what questions do you have?
The same thing to you?
Is it working on your end? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can.
Okay, well, Chrissy, I assume you can hear me since you're about 6 feet away. But
Yeah.
gotcha. You know, one question that I had, talking about shooting from down low, I do try and do that a lot, kind of, you know, and one thing I've, you know, when I'm trying to convey the emotion of a scene or something along those lines, or of a person, I shoot down low because it can kind of can convey the gravitas of somebody like who's speaking to a crowd or something like that. But my wife, looking at some of my photos, said, I bet a lot of the people you've shot from down low hate those photos from down low. And I bet a lot of those people think, wow, you gave me a big ugly double chin or something like that. Any thoughts on that?
Oh yes, I have plenty of thoughts about that. That is a challenging one, because if you're not giving them a double chin, you're looking straight up their nose or looking up their armpits or those kinds of things. And more voluptuous ladies must never be photographed from down below, right? Because it's never going to look great. And you have to be very diligent in terms of when you do that and why. And so the examples, if you think back to the examples that I showed you, none of those were portraits, right? So that, the other thing is it gives like, especially if your lighting is challenged, it gives that horror look, right? If the lady, it's like a movie, like a scary movie. So you have to be really careful with when you use it, and be careful also not to use it as a crutch, right? To think, and this is going a little bit deeper into the photography, you know, symbolism and stuff, because often what happens with us is that maybe we'll turn an image into black and white that we think it'll be more emotional, right? And, you know, we can tend to stereotype those things very easily with what we turn into black and white to make more emotional, which is a whole nother conversation. But when you are doing those low image, be thinking about what is it that I am doing. Like, I think that Nick's shot with the sign work, because the kid had a mask on and we weren't really looking up his nose, and it didn't distract. But with portraits, and especially the ladies, if they are voluptuous, they are very challenging to work with. You want to get up high, right? Because I'm looking up this way and I've reduced my 5 chins, right? So that will work so much better for anybody that you're in the office with, because this is never going to be that attractive, and we tend to go like this, you know, if we're not comfortable with the camera, and it just looks And so things you want to look for: up the nose, armpits, crotch shots. You know, that's easy to do. So you know, to be honest, I'm not supposed to do this, but I have done that because I didn't necessarily like the person or their philosophy, right? That's not really ethical, and it never happened when I was on the job, but that is a way of changing the vibe of someone, right? So great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick one. On Elliot's point, would you mind making like another cheat sheet for ISO uses?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Or any other things you may think of. I don't want to.
Yeah, I will definitely have a bunch of handouts for you guys after this. I wanted to see where you're at. And again, my point for today was just to get you guys excited and to be thinking about it, and not to be overwhelmed with the technical side of things, because you can make amazing pictures. Sadly, with your cell phones, you can make great pictures with any camera, as long as you're thinking more about being, you know, a photographer. And we'll do more of that specifically. So next week, please come with those technical questions. We're going to record, we have this recorded. We're going to give you a link to that, and I'll give you some additional handouts. What we'd also like for you guys to do is to send us a couple images that you shoot this week. And if you could send those as JPEGs to us, then I can look at what's called the metadata, which is how you shot it and what lens and all of those kinds of things, and tell you more specifically what happened, why it went wrong, or why it's incredible. More likely, I think they're all going to be incredible. Try shooting on that grid mode and see if that helps you. If it annoys you, take it off. It's just a way for you to start thinking a little bit differently, which is what I want you to do. Yeah.
Hey,
Mark.
Jill, I had, oh, sorry.
Just real quickly, I looked up the original Nick's photo of the protest kid with the sign, and the camera was set on ISO 160. It was shot at 1/320th of a second at f8.
So what was the ISO?
160.
Was it overcast that day, Nick?
Yes.
A little bit?
Yeah. Yes. I think I was on sport mode at that time, but I could have also just been tinkering with the eyes. I can't really remember. But it sounds like
The sky, they're spotty, bright sunshine with dark clouds. It was kind of a, you know, mostly cloudy sky.
yeah, partly cloudy.
So cloudy, I would say, you know, start off at 400, because you want more range. You want to be able to have more shutter speed, faster shutter speed, especially in that situation, and probably shallower depth of field. F8 is fine. And one of the other things that I want to recommend is that you guys start thinking about your own body language and your own positioning, right? So if you're worried and you're finding that a lot of your images are out of focus, get yourself a little bit more steady, right? So get your arms in a little bit more, you know, tight. If you're in a difficult situation where it's really dark, you know, lay on that motor drive, right? Because what happens when you do that, and I do that a lot, like if it's a candlelight vigil, for example, right? You guys are going to those, plenty. Get yourself, you have to use a high ISO. You don't have a lot of light options. Get yourself nice and tight. Lay on that motor drive, because what happens is that first image is going to be out of focus. And so is that last one, because it's when you're releasing, but the one right in the middle is going to be sharp, right? Because it's happening so fast. So don't be afraid to use that high drive mode. And I know it can be annoying when you're at a candlelight vigil hearing that, but you also have to remember, you know, be cautious about when you use it and how often and those kinds of things, and remember that's your job. So I think I got sidetracked. Did I? So the positioning, so this and hold your breath even. And make sure, because even this movement can make your images out of focus, right? Because you're up and down and you're focusing it and all of those things. So nice and steady. If it's a tight situation, you have the opportunity, get yourself right up against the wall and use the wall as your tripod. Okay, that help? Jessica, you were gonna ask, oh, hello, Ellis. We're here, so as long as you guys wanna stay, we're here.
This can go. That she was.
Yeah, Jill, I was going to ask about the harsh lighting. I saw that on your list of possible questions. I don't know what it is about Colorado, but I feel like I have that problem well beyond noon. Like I was just out this morning when I was expecting there to be softer light closer to sunrise, and it was really harsh lighting. It almost felt like I was shooting closer to the noon hour. But how do you deal with harsh lighting and harsh shadows on a subject?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's true. We have more powerful sun. We're closer to the sun, and then in the winter it gets even worse because you have white snow, and everything is reflecting. And so the secret is put everybody in the shade. Now, what were you shooting?
Like, what was the subject?
Yeah.
It was a portrait of a person.
First thing you guys want to do is go and find shade. It's called open shade, right? So let me share my screen again with you. Stand by a second. Bear with me, bear with me. Here is one of those examples, right? So on the right, sorry, Ellis, I'm picking on you. On the right, the gal is perfectly lit because she's under that white tent and it's creating that soft, beautiful light. And it's also reflecting off the ground, which is gray, and it's bringing and bouncing, what we call bouncing, that light back into her face, right? The guy on the left, he's out in the sun and it's all coming down on him and he's getting the bags under his eyes and all of that. So the first thing you want to do is find open shade. So open shade can be any hangover, that a pergola, or a hangover, not a hangover, but you know what I'm saying. A wall that is in the shade. You only need a little bit, and what's great about if you can find a wall with shade, it's going to reflect. That gray is going to come right up. Find a tree. Now, when you're out in a park and you're seeing shade or something like that, you have to be very careful about what we call dappled sun, right? So it's like when you have it's all shady, but then there's one bright spot, on their face. So you have to figure out, okay, move them. And the other thing is, and this is what the most common issue, people think, the old school thought is, I need to have sun on their face. No, right? Backlight is the best. So backlight, 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 right? So get that sun in the back of their head, behind them, right? Because then you're not, they're gonna be in shadow if the sun's behind them, and they'll get a nice, what's called a nice rim light. We'll show you some, I don't have any examples in here now, right? And then you can bring it up a little bit, but you wanna turn them away from the sun. Do anything you can, and especially in this, like right now, I would not wanna be shooting, right? So one of the things too that you can do is if you have a car shade, right? Like one of your car shades, a reflective car shade or a normal, and you just block that out. You can even take, depending on what your subject is, you can take something to help you with the shading over your lens, but also if you have something a little bit bigger, you can block that sun off, and it makes a beautiful, beautiful soft light, like the tent, right? So the key is away from the sun, although it seems counterintuitive. Does that help? And you had one actually here that was one of my ones that I was thinking about, Jessica, which, you know, it looks a little overcast, maybe not, the guy's bald, you know, you got everything, you know, it's tough, right? Because he's going to be all shiny and you want to get the background. And what you want to be thinking about in this type of a situation is, what's the subject? Is the subject this particular policeman, or is it that, I'm sorry, that's the school? Is that the school in the background? Right. So what's the important? What are you writing about? What's more important? Is it the building or is it the officer? And then just take him around to the side, really. Here's another tip. If tight is right. Tight is right. If it sucks, shoot it tight, right? You go into somebody's office, they have nothing on the walls and they're sitting in front of a computer. Ugh. Right? So just think about, let me shoot this tight and bring the character of the person, the personality of the subject through, because that's really what the story is about. Now, having said that, I think you have a great composition here. It's a nice use of wide angle. You have all the important information. There's no distractions. The problem is, you know, it's just not attractive for this guy because his eyes have disappeared, right? Because he's in the sun. And that's what's happened. Now, you know, if getting more advanced about it, you would have, you know, something under him, you know, if you wanted to use a reflector or something like that. And we can talk more about that. But the idea, go and, you know, get him leaning against the building rather, right? Ellis, your turn, finally.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so I just had a quick question about the grid mode. When I turned it on, I seem to have like 4 lines going each way, so a total of like 16 squares. And I didn't really see an option to go to the, you know, the thirds.
Really? Anna, are you there? Can you speak to that? Did
Yeah.
everybody have that issue?
Yeah, I have that issue too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw the same thing, how it was just all the lines. There's a way to set your focus so that it does it in 3. But I can look more into that for next week and see if there's a way to do it by just the thirds.
Sorry about that.
No, no problem. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great little thing for us to look into. So if it's annoying you or you don't find it useful, feel free. But if you can still imagine that idea of thirds, I know you're a mathematician there, you know, be thinking the important part about the grid is really how our eye moves and where we're placing that important information. So even if it has the 4s, right? Be thinking of our eye as Westerners, right? Moving left to right, and our eye going in a Z pattern. So putting that important information in those quadrants and getting away, what I really want to see you guys doing is getting away from the subject is right in the middle of the frame with a bunch of stuff all over, right? Or really very classical, which is the horizon line is in dividing the frame right in half, right? That's a standard way of looking, and you guys are totally above that. Great question, thank you. We'll get that detail for you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, if you have any other questions, I don't want to keep you guys, I know you're super busy. I hope this was useful. I really want to just remind you about those 3 things that you can do to make great images this week, which are really be thinking about a strong subject, especially when you're out and photographing events. Look for those people that are interesting and engaging. Control your backgrounds. Background will make or break you. Think about getting rid of those distractions and making those subjects pop. And fill the frame with important information. So as reporters, you guys know how to do that in your story. Make that happen in your images. We're here, I'm here, Anna's here. If you have any other questions, we can stick around if your questions didn't get answered. Please, please, please send us a couple images this week. And also, you know, if there's anything that you guys want to make sure that we cover, please ask. One of the things that I'm really curious about and a little bit concerned is how are you guys getting your images from the camera to the editor? Are you dragging and dropping? Are you using any kind of software? Do you have the ability to crop on your own? What do you, and I'll just open that up. What is the majority of the way you guys are post-processing, is what we call it, your images? Anybody?
If I could maybe jump in there for a minute. Yeah, you know, that actually kind of gets to something else I wanted to discuss as far as when we're talking about lighting and so forth. One issue I think that we have here just in the nuts and bolts of our process is that when we submit our photos, the thing that we're doing is we are sending them to our pagination department to prepare for our print editions. And it's the outcome of that process that ends up going back to our web stories. And so what that results in is a lot of very washed out photos. When I have a photo heavy story, I will go back in after that story has been posted and I will flush all the photos that have been prepared by pagination and I'll put back in my own photos to avoid that kind of washed out stuff. If it's just, you know, if it's something boring, I won't go to the trouble, but when it's a photo heavy story, I will. So, you know, I think when we're looking at some of our photos, that's something else to keep in mind. I think it's something that maybe we could have an internal discussion about, maybe changing up our process so that when we're pulling stuff for web, we're still pulling back from you know, our initial submittals. To that end, though, I mean, you know, by and large, we have not been, you know, expected to do any post processing at all. Now, again, when I have something where I have a photo that is really important or a photo heavy story, I have been using, I don't know if anybody else is using Pixlr. Pixlr. It's a browser-based Photoshop clone. And for our purposes, I mean, you know, for the purposes of what we're trying to produce here, it does everything I need. Yeah. I mean, I can do a lot of, you know, and I've been, you know, teaching myself a lot of stuff about burning in parts of a photo or lightening parts of a photo. You know, my Memorial Day photos, you know, I did that pretty heavily because, you know, it just, the way the cookie crumbled was I happened to be there at like high noon. So I had a bunch of photos of like, you know, little girls laying roses on veterans' graves and all that kind of stuff. And so I was able to go back in and lighten up faces, so I didn't just have these washed out faces or blacked out faces and stuff. So that's kind of the steps that I'm taking to kind of circumvent, you know, some of those issues.
I think that's a great point, and that's actually what I suspected, because I noticed that majority of your photos that run on digitally are very blown out with just white. And so that also makes it challenging for your readers, for me to critique, you know, because you guys are probably getting it right in a lot of instances, and then it gets to the digital, which is, and it looks like a totally different picture. And that's been one of my concerns. I've also see a lot of images that run with a lot of nonsense, meaning they could have been cropped to a really powerful picture with just that one option. And I do think that you need to have an internal discussion about that. I think Pixlr is a good option, and I would encourage, I believe that's free online, right? It's an internet opportunity, and I'd ask that you guys try to talk to each other about that. There's a couple other out there. And the other question for you to be thinking about, and also I would like to know, is what happens to these images? Are you saving them on a hard drive for yourself? Are they, are you keeping them on your cards? Are you cleaning your cards? Where do they go? Where do they end up? I mean, because it is really, really important. You guys are documenting the history of these towns, and I hate the idea that they're disappearing or they're not getting archived, and that is a bigger picture issue, which we're not really going to discuss, but I would like to encourage you guys to talk about that, and we can, you know, at any point talk about what a workflow might look like. And one of the things that we would like to do with you is maybe even just change your file names within your cameras. This is a very simple thing where it's really your initials, right? Because everybody's sending these images that are IMG. So who shot this? Who's, you know, and so if you specifically, and if anyone wants to hang around, we can show you how to do that. You know, it's like not having an editor on your stories, to not be able to edit your images. And if there is two processes, right? So the pagination guys, they're just thinking print, they're not thinking about digital. They have a totally different scale of the way that they process the images so that they look good on paper. And that's totally different from digital. And so is it, you know, creating two files, right? Is it, you know, what is the workflow? What is the most efficient workflow for you in that? What I would, until that issue is solved, what I would say to you is please get in there, and when you do have the time and it's more, you know, it's a spread or it's a cover, making sure that those images in your slideshow are all matching up and taking the time, because it's really, in the bottom line, it's for you and you're going to win a bunch of awards with it. So, you know, at least go into one of these platforms and crop your images when you can. That will be universal on the two platforms, and get it the way that you like. It's a great question. It's something that needs to be addressed for sure.
Jill, if I could jump, sorry, I was just going to say, in regards to post-production and editing, that's probably the area where we've had the least training historically here. And everybody's probably doing their own thing. So yeah. I know, like, when I was looking at the schedule, that was the session I was the most looking forward to, because I don't know that we've had formal training, at least I haven't, since I was in college, you know, and that was at this point a few years ago. So that's kind of the area where I think we could really use some sort of guidance when it comes to our photojournalism.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree. Do you think that, because I'm considering the financial costs, obviously you guys have that to be considering, do you think that the Pixlr would be a platform that you would all be able to buy into or use, relatively easy?
Yeah, we probably would want something user-friendly. I know some of our reporters don't have any software. I personally have used Photoshop for years, and at this point, you know, really all I do with Photoshop is embed my cut lines and my name to the photos. I haven't done much beyond that for a while now. And then, you know, David's using Pixlr, so I don't know. I'm personally paying for Photoshop, so I would like to continue using it, but I don't know if, you know, that's a little more technical than some of the other options. So,
well, what I would recommend, if you are on the cloud and you are doing that, actually Lightroom would be a better option for you, because you can create more catalogs with it. And Photoshop, I actually rarely use unless it's a great image that I need to adjust or, you know, really get fine detail on. And actually the Lightroom platform would be an option for you as a paper. There's also with that package, and I don't want to get into areas that are not really, I don't know where the paper stands. There's also, most photographers at newspapers use what's called photo mechanic. It doesn't actually do a ton of post-production, but it's a great way to catalog. What I would love to see you guys use is something like Lightroom or Bridge, because not only can you adjust those images individually, but you can create these catalogs. So you can have Highlands Ranch has all its images in there. You can have Littleton has all its, you can break down all your photos, Jessica's photo, you can have it be primary election. So when you guys are going through those archives, right, and you're needing, I need art, where's this guy, you know, where's the football player that's now the mayor, where's the, you know, whatever, you can be able to use that software, type in the name, and it's going to come up. And that's going to, time is money maybe, right, to save you a lot of that time with looking at archives, because as a small community paper, I know that's a huge part of what you do. And then it's like, oh, who shot this? When did they shoot it? You know, and it's just, I know, very challenging. So the internal discussion, and I'm happy to discuss it more with you as options. And I'll think about what we can do in that, with that platform that's free right now.
So I have a question. Is there any way that we can talk about some of the very basics, do's and don'ts about photo cropping?
Sure. Do you have something very do you have something in mind?
Not necessarily, just we've had, you know, just some very brief sessions, you know, through the years, just with some of our, you know, more experienced photographers on staff. And, you know, they'll say, oh, you know, you don't want to try to keep it to original size. And, you know, I have no idea what they would mean by that. You know, like what's too much of a crop, what's too little of a crop, what's, you know, dimensions, things like that.
Sure, yeah. What I'll do is I'll gather some images for you try to find some more specifics. And if you have any in mind, I would love for you to, I would really like to use your guys' as examples when this has been an issue. I think just really briefly on cropping, there's a couple things, because there's ethics involved as well, right? Because if we start cropping images to cut out people that were in the background, or we start cutting out important information, then are we really representing what we went there for? I think a lot of the images that I've seen so far can benefit from cropping, good cropping. I think there's a lot of distractions in many of the images that I don't believe, personally, I don't believe that it needs to be the format that it was shot in necessarily. I don't think that's a good way to look at art, as this is what came out of the camera. It's the same thing if you're thinking about, oh, this is my notes. Are you going to put your notes in the paper? No, right? So be thinking about, you know, what am I going to do to enhance this to make it a better image? Things to be careful of, and this is, a lot of this process happens in the camera first, right? With the way that we frame. I mentioned briefly, you know, cropping arms, cropping heads, getting distractions out. And there's not necessarily a one size fits all. You do have a standard size for your covers, right? So that has to be in the forefront of your mind when you're sent out on an assignment and you're told this is a cover shot, this is A1. Then you need to be thinking about that size. Most images, for the most part, can be cropped into a suitable image. And if you're shooting at a high resolution, which I'm not going to ask you guys to shoot in RAW, although I am curious who shoots in RAW, if anyone. Making sure that those images can be cropped to a smaller size to fit those ratios, I think is acceptable. I think, again, it's making those images happen first in the camera, right? So We want to spend as little time as we can, especially since you guys don't have the software, on the computer trying to fix things. So, you know, getting closer, that kind of thing. But I would love it if you would send me some more examples of that, because it's a double-edged kind of thing, especially with ethics. So that's a great question.
Hey, Jill, where can we go to get a refresher on ethics within photojournalism? Like, are there sources out there, just kind of cheat sheets anywhere?
It's my favorite topic. I love talking about that. I will send you some links, but National Press Photographers Association has guidelines that we're all meant to be following. They're very similar to what you do as reporters. But that is an excellent point, and I love talking about that because I think we can all see there's a lot of that happening right now. And, you know, like I mentioned with the woman who I photographed unattractively from down below, she was a politician, but it wasn't for the paper. But I mean, no matter what side of the fence you are on with Donald Trump, I doubt anyone's seen a good picture of him. Everything is you know, completely ridiculously shot. And what does that say? And that's a whole, you know, huge thing to be considering. It goes beyond, that's more, we're getting into bias, right? But the ethics, the photojournalism, NPPA is fantastic. And it's really similar to what you guys probably already follow. And I will send more on it because I love that topic. Thank you guys. Please send us questions. You have my email, you have Anna's email, and please send us, you know, your great work from this week. If you want to stick around, we can show you how to change the file names on your in your camera so that it's coming up with your initials, so it's not just being lumped in ING if you want. Otherwise, we will be here next week in the same time, same place, and we'll go more into that technical stuff. In the meantime, I did have some resources for you in the workshop guidelines. I'm going to be adding to those. Great stuff, and anything that you guys need, please let us know. It was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill and Anna. Appreciate it. We'll be back with you again next week at the same time. Wonderful.
I look forward to seeing all the great work.
And a reminder to everyone that tomorrow at 2 p.m. is our session with Susan Green and Tina Griego. Talk to us about great stories. So we'll see you then.
Great photos to go with them. Thank you, everybody. Anna, I will, let's end this call and then I'll call you back.
Okay, sounds good.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day. Be safe.
Bye.